Hey ho, dear ones. Today we're going to unpack a topic that just comes up a lot in my life with my own partner and with my clients. And that is why so many 5D light workers choose 3D partners. And I think the 5D, 3D distinction is sometimes a little bit black and white or a lot of bit. And there's a lot of gray area there. And, you know, I don't think most people are either 5D or 3D. I mean, our energies are always in flux and we're always going to the different dimensions. And that's what this is referring to, the different dimensions of our reality. And the third dimension is where most people spend most of the time. It's very physical, and it's very reaction based. So like you're not really intending your experience because most people don't realize that they can and they have that power or don't believe they have that power. And if you don't believe it, then it doesn't happen, just like anything. If I don't believe I can run a marathon, I probably won't finish a marathon. So you have to believe you have manifesting abilities, which is more of a 5D, fifth dimension quality when you're in those higher dimensions, which really means higher frequencies. So you can imagine in this conversation, what it really means is if you spend a majority of your being in those higher frequencies, where you are awake, you are asking why, you are questioning things that we've been taught that just don't make sense. Have you ever heard one of your parents say, like, I was just had this insight recently, like, when I was a kid, I'm a farm girl, I'm 50 years old. So I grew up in the, 70s. I was pretty little, but I kind of grew up in the 80s and 90s. And, we had this big blue station wagon that we called the Blue Barge. And I'm one of four kids. I'm the youngest. And when my mother had to go to town to get groceries, and the nearest grocery store was like 25 miles away, we had to drive 1/2 an hour to get a carton of milk. If we weren't getting it from our neighbors. And when I was really little, we did get milk from the neighbors. There was more of that sort of exchange happening among the neighbors, and we grew our own chickens for eggs. But as we got older and my mother went back to work, we had to rely on the grocery store. So we lived in the middle of the nowhere. This is a bit of a digression, but I do have a point here where when my mother went to town for anything, we all just crawled in the back, no seatbelt. And when I was a baby, my mother would hold me in the front seat while my father drove. There was no baby seat. And my mother said, well, we just didn't know better. We never thought about it. And that's true. I don't blame her. I survived. I'm casting no shade here. But I wonder now, as this awakened light worker who is questioning why, I wonder if it's safe to be in a car without a seatbelt, to question these assumptions. I wonder, in 20 years' time, when I'm talking to Freya and she says, remember when you used to do that to me? Or had me do that unsafe practice. And my response is going to be, well, at the time, I just didn't know any better. And I'm sure there's going to be actually, many of those moments. But I'm just wondering, as we get more and more connected to the divine, and we're responding to the divine more and less responding to what other people are doing, what the common practices are. And if the common practices are not to have your child wear a seatbelt in a car, but the divine is telling you, wear a seatbelt in the car, now, in theory, as a light worker, as a 5D light worker, you're going to follow your higher self. Now, my higher self has called me to all sorts of things that I just haven't been able to integrate. I haven't been able to surrender to. So it's not to say that we're following it all the time, but the 5D light worker is just someone who is vibrating at those higher frequencies, not high vibe all the time. We're not meant to be there yet, but we're getting there. We're on our path to enlightenment. And the 3D person, and nobody's better than the other. It all just is, right? We're all just on our own path. And these are just two different paths. a 3D person in this sort of definitions I'm using, because I do think 5D versus 3D is too simplistic. So that's why I'm taking a moment to explain what this really is. If you would say someone is a 3D person, and again, I don't even like saying that, it just puts an unfair label on people. But for the purposes of this conversation, to keep it clear, is a person who's probably vibrating in the lower frequencies, not asking why, doesn't know a lot about energy healing, so not releasing energy blocks, not questioning conditioned thoughts, not being surrendered to the voice of the higher self, not really knowing how to do that, not asking, how can I learn how to do that? So there's just this openness and this willingness with the 5D light worker, asking why, choosing a healing path, connecting to higher self, surrendering to higher self. So I see a lot of people, light workers, in partnership with 3D partners. And to be honest, gosh, I don't even know. My partners, I would call him a 3D partner, and I'm definitely 5D. I would say for many years on our partnership, I did keep my spiritual side of me secret. And it's not that I was trying to hide it from him. It was more, I knew that he wasn't aligned. So I think my idea was, well, like, what's the point? He believes something else. And I'm not saying I'm right and he's wrong. I'm just saying we have two different beliefs. So why share this with him when he's just going to be like, yeah, sure. Yeah, right, Allison. But then one day I realized that that doesn't serve me and it doesn't serve him. Because if I can't share with him this key and essential part of who I am, or if I'm rather, I could have, I was choosing not to. If I choose not to share this like key and essential, I feel like it's almost all of who I am. It is who I am with my life partner, then that's not good for the health and welfare of the relationship to build a true relationship and not a relationship that just goes through the motions. It's perfunctory, it's logistical. And one day I woke up and I said, I don't want a logistical relationship. I want a bonded, a true, a loving, a supported, a respectful relationship. So I decided to start sharing. And I shared more and I shared more. And I haven't even really shared with him a lot of my really out there ideas, which I don't share with most people. And that's okay. We all get to have our secret gardens. So I don't think there's ever a situation where we should be sharing all things and all ideas to our partners. But I do know on this journey of really opening up, I have a long way yet to go with him. And it's not that I feel like he'll reject me or anything. It's, again, it gets back to that kind of, I think my limiting belief is sort of, what's the point? He's not going to see it my way anyway, so I might as well just keep it to myself. And again, I do feel like I feel safe, I feel respected with my partner. So me not opening up gets back to, well, he won't get it, and that's okay. He doesn't have to believe, and your partner doesn't have to believe what you believe. But the questions to ask are, do you feel safe opening up? Do you feel mutual respect and trust that you can share? And do you feel respect in your ideas, even if they don't share your ideas with you? Is there sort of a respect for it? And if you get a yes to that, more or less, it's never 100%, but if you're in a net positive to those questions, can you start opening up more and more and more and see how it enables the relationship to become more real, more true, more bonded? But let's get to the real question here. Why do we 5D lightworkers choose 3D partners, if indeed that's what you've done? And it doesn't have to be a romantic partner. If you're not in a romantic partnership, like, why did we come to manifest the 3D boss or the 3D friend or the 3D fill in the blank? I think most of us have 3D parents. So we all have people in our lives that aren't at the same level of spirituality. And I mean by people, I mean close people in our lives. My daughter Freya is on this kick of rejecting spirituality. And my husband has tried to take her to church as well, and she's really just questioning it. She's really suspicious of it all. I did a podcast episode on this. Freya's a real starseed kid. Starseed kids aren't just going to take what you tell them if they feel that it doesn't sit well for them. And I really burned a bridge of trust with my daughter by doing the whole Santa Claus thing. And we live in the Netherlands where they have Sinterklaas, which is like Dutch Santa Claus. And I knew at the time I didn't feel right lying to her, although I think it's lovely and sweet and magical. So if you practiced those traditions or Easter Bunny with your children and you have lovely memories, beautiful, because it is fun. It's so fun and it's so magical to be an expression of those stories with your kids. But what that costs us is trust. And it breaks our kids, I believe, ability to believe what they can't see. Because we're telling them that there's this man who lives in the North Pole with elves who gives you presents when you're good and gives you coal when you're bad. I mean, that's really the essence of the story. So even if you didn't tell that story, they're getting it from the songs and from the ritual that is a Santa Claus at Christmas time. And then one day they realize that Santa Claus isn't real and the whole story is actually a lie. Now you can say, no, but it's a fantasy, but no, it's this and no, it's that, but it's a lie. We are lying to our kids. And when Freya realized that I was lying to her and that I was giving her the presents, she felt so hurt. She felt so betrayed by me. So now when I tell her about fairies in the forest, and my belief is that there are the spirit of the fairies very, very strongly in the forest near to where I live, a very high consciousness connection of, the non-physical consciousness of the fairy realm. And when I talk about that with my daughter, she's like, yeah, right, sure. And the subtext is like, another lie, Mom. And that's like, oof, that was a lesson that stung hard for me because I knew at the time I didn't want to be lying to my kid about anything, to include Santa Claus. I just didn't want to lie to my kid. I don't ever want to lie to my kid. I want to always model honesty to all my children. But I didn't do that. And at the time, indeed, it was magical and it was fun and, we loved it. And getting back to the point of this episode, which isn't about Santa Claus, it's about 3D, 5D partnership. This was a time where I was telling my partner I really wanted to be honest with him about Santa Claus, and he really didn't. He really wanted to play out the Santa Claus, let's call it the fairy tale. Because again, please know, if you have fond memories, maybe you have little kids now, and it's something you want to do and you feel called to do, please do. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just sharing my experience. That's all. And I'm just saying this is, I believe, a reason why a lot of children then get into older ages and then they're like, well, if I can't believe in something I can't see, because I did that when I was a kid and I got burned. So that's truly and honestly all I'm saying. So my partner really wanted to do the Santa Claus tale, and I said yes to, keep harmony in the family. And I'm not blaming him. I too wanted the fairy tale. I wanted the magic. I wanted to see Freya's eyes get all big and wide and be like, wow, Santa Claus brought me this present. Wow. Because it is this magical feeling, but it's not real and it's based on a lie. And again, this is my perspective, so please feel free to disagree with me. And please, please, please be with your connection to higher self to feel what feels right and true for you. If I had to do it over again, and had I had the benefit of hindsight because I had no idea that Freya would have been so betrayed, like really betrayed by me when she found out there was no Santa Claus. So had I had that hindsight and had I just really surrendered to higher self, and what I really wanted was I really wanted to just be honest, but still play out the story. Especially Sinterklaas. Like, he's a dude that actually lived. He was a saint, and we could have still played out the story of Sinterklaas, and we could have given the presents and done all the rituals, but just been honest about it, which is what I wanted to do. And had I to do it over again, I would have said to my husband, it's really important to me not to lie to my child about anything, including Santa Claus. And I believe and I think in a situation like that, it's better when you're in a unified front with your co-parent, that we play out the story, but tell her it's just that. It is a story. And to teach her the history of the man, the saint who existed, who used to put mandarin oranges in people's shoes. And back in that time, mandarin oranges were hard to find, and it was a real treat. It was a real luxury item, in fact. And so in the Sinterklaas tradition, we put the presents in the children's shoes. They put their shoe out. It's kind of like the stocking concept. But I didn't, and I just went along with it against my better judgment. And it didn't work out great for me, but that's okay, because if it happened, it was meant to happen. And I healed and I learned the lesson, and now I'm retooling. And I'm really more cautious on how I communicate to Freya with regards to that which you cannot see, because now she just wants proof of everything. So there is way to provide people with spiritual proof. And so I'll get to that in a minute. So getting back again to the question of this episode, I keep getting side railed, but my higher self keeps inviting me to do so because it's adding to the conversation. Why do we choose 3D partners when we're 5D? Most people who are in a very close partnership, like a romantic partnership, and I won't say it's 100% of the time, but I will say very, very often, you've had one or several past lifetimes with this partner, and you have a soul contract with this partner. So in a way, if you're in partnership with someone that you have a soul contract with, there's definitely 5D ties here. This extends beyond our physical reality, that 3D reality. There's a higher purpose, a long tail of the experience. So it might be interesting for you if you get a higher self yes to your partner. You do have a past lifetime connection. If you do, it's very, very highly likely that you have a soul contract. And, it's worth it to explore into what is the soul contract? What is the healing that is meant to be learned? And I know of several now of my past lifetimes with Pete. I've had several. And we all have a pool of soulmates. So these are souls that we have a really deep connection to, that we tend to choose again and again and again to be in partnership with. So we don't have just one soulmate, but we have a pool, not a large pool, but a stable. I'm not going to give a number here. Let's see. Can I get a number? I'm just going to see if I get one from higher self. So I'm just getting the numbers anywhere between 25 and 500. And that might sound like a lot, but we've all lived many, 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 many lifetimes. So it's actually not that many. It is likely that if you are in a romantic partnership with somebody and it feels deep, it might not be joyful. It could be very painful. But the connection, the energy, the bond feels deep. It is very likely that it's either a soulmate or it's someone who's not in your soulmate pool, but you've had a past lifetime connection or entanglement with. And if it's a painful relationship, it's likely somebody that you have more of an entanglement with, that you're just meant to meet in this lifetime so you can heal, grow, and evolve. So, in a way, they're all soulmates. So if you've been in a romantic partnership and that partner gave you a lot of pain, but you needed that pain and that triggering to heal and learn and grow, what a soulmate gift. Those people are like, yes, soulmate gifts. They give you the gift of a soulmate would do, which is healing, evolution, and growth and learning. But they're not necessarily the soulmate because they didn't bring you the joy. And when you're in partnership with one of these soulmates, there is that frequency of joy. It doesn't mean joy all the time. It doesn't mean there isn't pain. It doesn't mean there isn't sometimes big pain. But you can tap into this feeling of joy and alignment. And the thing that strikes me about Pete, who's one of my soulmates on this soul level, is how the thing that just makes me really love the dude, and he can drive me crazy, trust me, but the thing that I just feel such a deep bond and appreciation for him for is that on a soul level, this lifetime, the one I'm in now, was going to be a big lifetime for me because of my near-death experience, because of my mission, because of the healing I needed to do. And I needed a strong, grounding figure in my life to support me through it. And what I learned was a lot of my other soulmates and I didn't really explore too far into this, and I know that there's a divine reason why, right? But they were all kind of like, I'm out. But Pete raised his hand and said, I'll do it. I'll be her partner in this lifetime and be the father of her children. I'll do it. And that came to me when I did my Akashic record reading with Debbie Solaris, which I just reported a podcast episode on. And if you haven't caught that one, I really invite you to do so. But when she told me that, when he said, I'll do it, I volunteer. I was just like, wow. And the reason it struck me so much is because we have this pool of soulmates, but we also have a twin flame. Now, the twin flame concept in spirituality has been talked about in a variety of different ways. I know that there was like a twin flame cult. So there's a lot of like dark stuff in the twin flame conversation. And I don't know a lot about that. I don't know a lot about the twin flame concept, but I'm going to tell you very specifically the way in which I'm using it. And this became very clear to me when I had my NDE and I was downloading all of how things really work and, the soul experience and what we experience on our soul journey. And the thing that I downloaded was that we have a super soulmate. So we have our pool, somewhere between 25 and 500 soulmates that we tend to find from lifetime to lifetime. And we have lots of soul contracts with this pool. But we also have kind of a super soulmate. And so I'm getting, when I connect to higher self, that's the true meaning of the twin flame. It's the super soulmate. And the thing about the super soulmate is that there's lots of lifetimes where we don't incarnate with our twin flame. We're not even on the same planet at the same time. My twin flame is not on planet Earth right now. My twin flame said, I cannot sign up for Allison's lifetime. Like, I'm out. And the reason why is because imagine it for a second. Imagine, and you might be in partnership now with your twin flame. I've had a couple of clients who were in partnership in this lifetime with their twin flame. And here's what it looked like. It was all bliss all the time. Because you're so compatible. There's such a deep love. There's such a deep bond. There's this like crazy compatibility. It's two puzzle pieces fitting perfectly together. And I'm thinking of two examples of a client and a peer that I know that were in lifetimes with their twin flame and what happened in both. And I'm not going to say that this happens in all, but this is just coming to me now that this happened in both, that the partner passed relatively young, and in one case, quite young. And the person remaining on planet was absolutely devastated. Why? Because they had soul contracts to feel that loss so that they can heal the stored grief inside. And there's usually kind of a shock factor to it that they needed to heal, grow, learn, and evolve. So if you are in a lifetime now with the twin flame, do not worry that your partner may cross. I mean, we're all going to cross at some point. So this doesn't mean this is not a guaranteed thing to happen. But usually, even when you're in a lifetime with a twin flame, it's not going to be all blissed out all the time. And maybe in other situations I've seen with twin flames, there's been family challenges where the in-laws didn't accept and kids. And so, there's always going to be something. It's never going to be effortless until we reach enlightenment in human form. And we'll still have challenges, but we'll just see every challenge as an opportunity because we have no wounds left to heal. But until we reach enlightenment into human form, we're going to choose our lifetimes based on what we need to heal from, grow to, learn from, evolve to. So everything is about healing, growing, learning, and evolving. And so we choose our challenges. And when we choose partnerships, our sort of deeper, longer-term partnerships, romantic or otherwise, there's going to be some soul contracts in there that's going to require challenge and struggle. That's just part of it. So we have our pool of soulmates, and we have the super soulmate, which some people call the twin flame. You can ask your higher self, if you're not in a partnership, am I meant to meet my twin flame in this lifetime, or is this not a lifetime for that? Because that kind of creates the love bubble. And you know what? I don't know. I'm okay not being in a love bubble. I am pretty okay with it. But if you're in a love bubble, then that's your destiny for this lifetime. So if you're in a partnership, I would ask, is this my twin flame? See if you get a yes or no. If you're not sure, you can trust your yes, no's. See what just feels more like a yes or no and start to test. Use that as your working theory and then ask again. If you get a no, you can ask, is my partner part of my pool of soulmates? And then if you get a no to that, it doesn't mean, maybe you get a no, my partner's not my twin flame. No, my partner's not a soulmate, but beautiful. I mean, you're creating a new soul connection. So it doesn't mean every lifetime will be with a soulmate. And if you're not with a soulmate, it doesn't mean you've made the wrong choice, right? So these are the questions you can ask. And then you can ask for the close partnerships in your life. You can ask, do I have a soul contract with this partner? It's very likely you will get a yes. And then the question becomes, what is the soul contract I'm being asked to fulfill right now? We have too many to explore all of them. It's not a good use of our times. Takes us down a rabbit hole that just distracts us. So the question is always, what soul contract am I being called to fulfill at this point in our journey together? So what are some of the things a 3D partner can give us as 5D lightworkers? They can give us grounding. They can give us stability. They can, and this is not, all partners do this, but I'm just saying these are characteristics of the things they can give us. They can give us a steady paycheck. A lot of my lightworker clients have their own businesses, and we are subject to the ebbs and flows of the market, and it's not always easy to sell ourselves. So we can have good months, good years, bad years. So maybe you have a 3D partner who has that steady paycheck that enables you to do your lightworker work in the world. They can provide you with this push-pull of not being on the same page of how you see the world, but giving you the opportunity to express yourself anyway and to communicate your boundaries and to show up as the true you, even if you know that they're not going to get it and they're not going to see it the way you are. And they might even say, well, that's really weird or strange or out there. Give me proof of that. So, like I said, we're not here to be in the love bubble, unless maybe it's a twin flame lifetime. And maybe you are meant to be in the love bubble, but then you will have challenges and struggles in other areas of your life, or there'll be things poking at your bubble, right? So there's so many gifts we get from these partnerships. And on my journey to setting the intention to be more and more open and honest with Pete about all parts of myself, myselves, I just made it plural. And there are many parts of myselves, the mini me's. I noticed something really beautiful happening. We're at the beginning of the partnership when we first, got together and I first started opening up. I could really see that he was like, whoa, I don't know about this. Like, this is a little bit too out there for me. I don't know if this is the right person for me. I could feel that. And because I really wanted to be in partnership, I then really shut that part of myself down. But then as we went on and we grew and, we got married and then kids, and then we started to grow in partnership. And I started to, share more and more and more of my true self with him. I noticed that little by little by little, all of the things that I shared with him started to land as less weird for him, less out there. And then all of a sudden, I noticed that he started to get more and more open to my ideas, and I wasn't trying to convince him. I really wasn't. I was just sharing with him more and more openly how I see the world. And then recently, something really miraculous happened. Someone from his work who's the same age and same demographic as him, so he can look at this person and really see someone similar, right? My husband met a woo friend. And this, friend, coworker is really spiritual. And he even has ideas that are really out there and ideas that I don't necessarily align to. And I'm like, oh, I don't know about that. But ever since then, I've noticed Pete getting even more open about spirituality in ways that I've never experienced before. So I'm going to keep communicating my truth. And I've told him that some of his coworkers' ideas, I say, well, I don't really align to that. Here's why. And I just keep sharing what is true for me. No convincing, no cajoling. This is what's true for me. And this is why. And sometimes you can share why, but you don't even need to share why. And it's really created this next level of bonding because I'm opening him up to a new aspect of life. I mean, my intention, I would love to be a person on his path that supports him in moving from a 3D to more of a 5D without changing things for him. And he can still be like grounded in reality and all the things, but just to help him heal some of those big wounds and help him move into these higher frequencies, because in these higher frequencies, we do have access to more joy and more alignment and more love and more connection. So if I'm successful in supporting him and moving through that journey, then that is a really, truly beautiful thing. And I can say with clarity that he has definitely supported me for the most part. And we've had dark nights of the soul. We've had painful moments. We've had moments where I thought, oh, the relationship isn't going to make it, for sure. It has not been all rainbows, and unicorns. And we've gotten through those times. We've healed, we've learned, we've grown, we've evolved. And now I can really say that he has really supported me, like truly supported me. And now that I know that on a soul level, he said, I'll do it. I'll marry her. That just makes me feel this like soul love. And soul love is so much better than romantic love. Romantic ego love is so needy. It's so up and down and all over the place. There's so much attachment. It's exhausting. As someone with an open sacral, I don't have the energy for that. But soul love is grounded, it's steady, it's constant, it's unattached. So if something were to happen to the human-to-human relationship, that I know I always have the soul love. The soul love never dies. The human dies, but the soul love never dies. And it is deep, and it's profound, and it's penetrating. And I feel like we've up-leveled to that in the partnership. And if you asked him, and by the way, I've asked him to come back on the show. I interviewed him like 3 or 4 years ago, but I want to have a follow-on conversation with him to talk these issues through. I was surprised with his response. He said, I'll think about it. But I'm going to see if I can get him back on the show to have this same conversation together. And I'm not going to prep him. Like, I don't think he listens to the podcast, so I'm sure he won't listen to this episode. But maybe he secretly listens to it, but I don't think he does. So I'm not even going to tell him I recorded this episode. And I'm going to see how it aligns up. Now, he might tell you a totally different perspective than what I just shared, but this is my perspective of his experience. And so my perspective can always be wrong, right? So hopefully he agrees to come on the show, and there is going to be a part 2. But before we wrap up for today, I wanted to get back to this idea of spiritual proof. So if you're in a relationship with someone who is 3D, and 3D folks want proof, they want to see it to believe it. 5D folks want to believe it, or they tend to believe it to see it, right? And when you're dealing with the non-physical realm, you have to believe it to see it because it's not physical. But 3D folks want to see it first, and then they can believe it. So that's why this idea of spiritual proof to a 3D person can really help open them up. How can you provide 3D proof? Well, if you ever get a psychic hit for someone, or a psychic hit is just an intuitive hit that's tapped into a future potential timeline. So sometimes if I get a big hit of something that will happen in the future, I make sure to tell Pete, because then if it plays out the way I said it would, that's like some pretty heavy spiritual proof that, hey, I'm tapped into something that can be trusted. And sometimes, for example, when we're going on a walk with Astrid in the forest, fairies tend to gather in circles, and nature can grow around a fairy circle. So there's a tree in my fairy forest that's literally shaped, an old, beautiful, majestic, amazing tree that grew itself into this huge circle. You can stand inside the ring of the tree. Its branches have grown in a ring. And you can stand there and you can feel the fairy energy. You can feel it. Now, fairies don't like anyone to be in their circle. They're very choosy frequency because they're here to protect Mother Earth and the living beings, mostly the animals. But if you're a person who is in high consciousness service to Mother Earth with love and respect for all living beings and all animals, the fairies love people who have that frequency. And then you get sort of invited into their circles. And when you are conscious of the fairies and you are conscious of the circles, then you can be conscious of the invitation in. If you're not thinking about it and walking through, and I've walked past the fairy tree 1,000 times before I realized, like, oh, wow, that's a fairy tree. So had I been standing in it, now they would have been nice to me because they like me because I have a good connection to the fairy realm. But had I been standing there, just standing there, I wouldn't have really felt anything because I wasn't in the receiving mode. But when you're conscious of it and you feel the invitation and then you walk in and then you put your conscious awareness on the energy inside the circle, all of a sudden you can really feel it. So with Freya, I've invited her into some of these fairy circles, and I'm very light and breezy about it. I'm like, let's just be curious. I wonder if, do you see this tree literally grew into a ring? And so the last time I invited her in the ring, she couldn't deny it, that she could feel the powerful sensations of the energy there. And you can feel yourself naturally wanting to rotate in a clockwise direction because of sort of the energy vortex that's created. And for me, I just feel this profound energetic sensation right at my crown chakra. And so that's a hard thing to deny. Well, a 3D person would say, yeah, you planted the seed in her head. You planted this idea and now it's playing out. But I don't know. I don't think so. I think, yes, if I think about my body tingling, like right now, I'll just think about my body is tingling, and my body will sort of start to tingle. I just, as I say that, I feel a little bit of tingling in the body. But when I go into that fairy ring, I feel it showering my body. It so transcends. I think about it, so I feel it. It just takes it to a new level. It's like if you ask anybody who's had a near-death experience if it was like a dream, and they will all say no. We know what it's like to dream when we sleep, and we know what it's like to have an NDE, and these are two entirely different things. So that's why if a 3D person ever says to someone who's had an NDE, oh, you probably thought it was an NDE, but you were just dreaming, that's a really hurtful thing to say because they are two entirely different things. All right, let's recap. I shared a lot of different things in this episode, but it really was all going to the direction of the 3D, 5D partnerships. To sum it up, we choose our 3D partners for a lot of reasons, but they're divine. It's soul contracts, they're soulmates, they might be a twin flame. There's something there that we need to heal from, grow to, evolve to, learn from. Our 3D partners give us so much. And my invitation for you this week is to start asking questions about the big partnerships in your life. Ask about your current romantic partner. If you're not in a romantic partnership and you want one, ask who's out there that you're destined to meet. If you are not in a romantic partnership and you don't want a romantic partner, think about the other important partnerships in your life. And ask, is there a soul contract? And what is the soul contract I'm being asked to fulfill, or at least fulfill the next layer of at this point in my journey? All right, my dear ones, that is a wrap for this week. I am so grateful for you each and every week. And as always, until next time, may you return to Soul Alive. Ooh, I'm playing around with my closing tagline. I have another one I want to try on with you. And until next time, may you always be returning to Soul Alive. Ooh, I like that because it is a returning. returning to your alignment, but always returning to higher alignment. So until next time, may you always be returning to soul alive.